Welcome back to another story on Echo Story. Before we begin, tell us where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Part 1. The Lie About My College Money. The radiator ticked in the corner, metal popping as it cooled. It was late Sunday evening and I sat at the kitchen table, flipping the same bank statement over in my hands. The paper felt slick where my fingers had pressed too hard. Across from me, my dad sipped coffee like it was any other night. But I couldn't stop hearing my mom's voice from earlier that week. "Honey, the college money is gone. We had no choice." That was the first time I realized something didn't add up. I should explain. For as long as I can remember, there had been a promise, a college fund. My parents weren't rich, but they always told me they were saving for my future. Birthdays, Christmas, random Saturdays. My grandparents would hand me envelopes and say, "This is for your college one day." And my mom would nod and smile, then put it away for safekeeping. I trusted that. I built my teenage years around that trust. When other kids worked extra shifts at the gas station or worried about loans, I believed I wouldn't have to. Not because I was spoiled, but because I was told over and over that the money was waiting for me. So when senior year came around and acceptance letters started to show up, I asked the question. I was sitting on the couch, holding an envelope, from a university in my lap, heart racing. So, how do we do this? Do I call the bank about the college fund or do you? The look my mom gave me that night was something I'll never forget. It was this strange mixture of pity and exhaustion, like she was already rehearsing the excuse in her head. Dad didn't even look up from the TV. And then she said it. "Sweetheart, there isn't a fund anymore. Things came up. We had to use it." Just like that. No warning. No apology that sounded real. Just we had to. At first, I thought I had misheard. "Wait, what do you mean gone? How could it be gone?" Mom leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "Your dad lost hours at work during the pandemic, then the roof needed repairs, then we had medical bills. We used the money. We didn't want to tell you until now because, well, what good would it have done?" The words hit like stones. Every birthday check from Grandpa. Every little folded bill Grandma pressed into my hand. Every time I said no to things because I thought there was a bigger plan. Gone. I remember going upstairs, shutting my door, and just sitting on the floor with my head in my hands. I wasn't even angry yet. Just hollow. The thing is, I might have swallowed it, might have forced myself to believe the story, if not for what happened a week later. I was cleaning up my dad's desk in the den. He's a mess with paperwork, and since Mum was always nagging about clutter, I decided to sort some things into piles. That's when I found it. A dusty folder with the words "Education Savings" written in Mom's neat handwriting across the front. Inside were statements from a credit union account. My name was on them. The last one was recent, dated only a month earlier. And the balance? Still there. Not millions. Not even enough to pay for 4 full years. But definitely not gone. I sat there, staring at the numbers, my pulse in my throat. They lied. I carried that folder upstairs and laid it out, on my bed like a crime scene. I read every line, every deposit, every note. My grandparents' names appeared over and over in the memo lines. It wasn't just savings, it was their legacy to me, and my parents had looked me in the eye and said it was gone. Why? That was the question I couldn't shake. Why lie when the account still existed? Did they plan to keep it from me forever? Use it for themselves. Hand it off to my younger sister when her turn came. I didn't have answers. But I knew one thing. If I asked them again, they'd deny it. They'd come up with another story. So I decided not to ask. Not yet. That night, lying in the dark, I thought about every conversation I'd had with them over the years. Little cracks showed up in my memory, moments where they had dodged questions or gone quiet whenever money came up. I realized something else too. This wasn't just about college. This was about trust. If they could lie about this, what else had they lied about? The next day at school, I sat through classes like a ghost. My friends were talking about dorm shopping lists and roommate assignments. I kept thinking about that folder in my backpack, zipped into the inner pocket where I hoped no one would see it. At lunch, my best friend Ethan noticed. "You look like someone died." I almost laughed. "Yeah, kind of feels like it." He pushed his tray toward me. "Talk." I shook my head. "Not yet. Because how do you even begin?" My parents told me my college fund was gone, but I found proof it's still there. It sounded like the kind of paranoid rant people roll their eyes at, but I knew it was real. And the longer I sat with it, the more the anger started to creep in. That evening, I made a choice. Instead of confronting them directly, I went to the credit union myself. The branch smelled faintly of ink and carpet cleaner, and the receptionist gave me a polite but wary smile when I explained why I was there. I showed her the statement. She tapped at her computer, then asked for my ID. My hands were sweating when I slid it across the counter. "Okay," she said finally. "Yes, this account is active. And yes, you're the beneficiary." Her words rang in my ears like church bells. Active, beneficiary. I thanked her, walked out, and sat in my car gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. They had lied to my face about my own account. That was when I knew this was bigger than a misunderstanding. This was deliberate, and I had no idea what to do next. Part 2. The account they denied. The first night after I went to the credit union, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it click faintly with each turn, my thoughts spinning just as fast. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that account balance. It wasn't even the number itself that kept me awake. It was the betrayal behind it. My parents had looked me straight in the eye and said it was gone, that it had been used up for bills and repairs. But it wasn't gone. It was right there, still in my name, still active. So why the lie? The next morning, I dragged myself downstairs trying to act normal. Mom was at the stove flipping pancakes, humming like nothing in the world was wrong. Dad sat at the table reading the newspaper, his glasses slipping halfway down his nose. For a second, I wondered if I'd dreamed it all. But then I touched the folder in my backpack, the one I'd tucked under my textbooks. No, it was real. "Morning," Mom said. Her voice had that sing-song cheerfulness she used when she wanted to cover tension. I muttered back, "Morning." Dad didn't even glance up, just grunted. I sat down at the table, and for a long minute, I thought about pulling the folder out and slamming it down right in front of them. Thought about saying, "Explain this." But something in me held back. It felt like stepping into a trap I couldn't see. So instead, I ate my pancakes in silence. The day dragged on. At school, I could barely focus. My teachers' voices blurred. Together, just noise in the background. In English class, Mrs. Connor asked me about a passage in Macbeth. I stared at her for a second before blurting, "Sorry, what was the question?" The class laughed. She frowned. I scribbled nonsense in my notebook just to look busy. At lunch, Ethan cornered me again. "Dude, seriously, what's going on? You look like you haven't slept in a week." I thought about telling him the truth, but the words stuck in my throat. How do you explain something like this without sounding insane? So I just shook my head and said, "Family stuff." He gave me a look, but didn't push. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. After dinner, I carried my plate to the sink, rinsed it, and set it down harder than I meant to. Mom gave me a sharp look. "You okay?" she asked. I turned around, heart thudding. "I went to the credit union today. The way her face changed in that split second told me everything. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. Then she tried to plaster on a calm smile. "Why would you do that?" Dad folded his newspaper slowly, finally paying attention. "What's this about?" I swallowed. "The account, the one you said was gone. It's not. It's still active. My name's on it." The silence that followed was heavier than anything I'd ever felt in that house. Mom set the spatula down like it suddenly weighed 10 pounds. "We didn't want you to get ideas," she said softly. "Ideas." My voice cracked. "It's my money. My grandparents." "Money for me? How is that an idea?" Dad rubbed his temples. "College is expensive, son. What's in that account isn't enough to cover it all. We didn't want you depending on it and then being disappointed." I stared at him, stunned. "So instead of being honest, you just lied? You told me it was gone?" Mom's jaw tightened. "We were protecting you." Protecting me. The phrase echoed in my head like a bad joke. I don't even remember what I said next. Something about how they had no right, how they'd broken my trust. My voice rose. Theirs did too. It turned into shouting, words flying across the kitchen like knives. Finally, Dad slammed his hand down on the table. "Enough! We're your parents. We know what's best." I felt something inside me snap. "Not anymore," I said, my voice low. "Not if this is what you call best." Then I grabbed my backpack and walked out the front door. I didn't go far, just to the park down the street. The air was cool, the grass damp under the bench where I sat. I pulled out the folder and opened it again, reading the numbers for the 100th time. My hands shook with adrenaline and anger. Ethan texted me. "Where you at?" I stared at the screen, then typed back. "At the park. Need space." He didn't reply, but 10 minutes later he showed up anyway. He dropped down on the bench beside me, saw the papers in my lap, and raised an eyebrow. "What's all this?" I hesitated, then finally told him everything. From the promise of the fund, to the lie, to the credit union visit, to the blow-up in the kitchen. When I finished, Ethan just shook his head slowly. "Man, that's messed up." "Yeah." My voice was flat. "What are you gonna do?" I stared at the folder. "I don't know yet, but I can't let them control it. Not anymore." Over the next few days, things in the house were icy. Mom barely spoke to me unless it was necessary. Dad pretended everything was fine, which somehow made it worse. The lie hung between us like smoke nobody wanted to acknowledge. But I had already decided on one thing. I was going to take control of that account. The question was how. On Friday after school, I went back to the credit union. The same receptionist recognized me. "Back again?" I nodded, trying to sound casual. "Yeah, I just had some more questions." She led me to a desk where a representative explained things more clearly. Because my name was on the account, I had rights to it. But since my parents had been listed as custodians when it was first opened, there were still limits until I turned 18. I was 17 and a half. 6 more months. 6 months of pretending. 6 months of keeping quiet while they thought. I still believed their lie. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling again, but this time there was a strange calm under the anger. I had a timeline now. I had knowledge they didn't know I had, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I felt a flicker of power. Part 3. 6 months in the shadows. It's funny how time slows down when you're waiting for something that feels bigger than you. 6 months doesn't sound like much on paper, but when you're 17 and living in a house where every glance feels like a test, it stretches out like an endless winter. After that blow-up in the kitchen, things between me and my parents never went back to normal. We weren't screaming anymore, but the silence was worse. Mom moved around me like I was made of glass. setting down dinner plates without looking me in the eye. Dad tried to bury it in small talk, asking about school or the weather, like we hadn't detonated a bomb in the middle of the family trust. And me? I played along. I stopped bringing it up. I nodded when they talked. I said thanks when they handed me gas money. But inside, every word felt fake. Because I knew. I knew the money was there. I knew they'd lied. And I knew all I had to do was wait. I built little rituals to get through those months. Every couple of weeks, I'd stop by the credit union after school just to check. I'd sit at the desk with a new representative, slide over my ID, and ask for an updated balance. They'd print it out, and I'd fold the paper carefully into my binder, right between math notes and a half-finished essay draft. Watching that number, stay steady, untouched, was the only thing that kept me sane. Proof, evidence. My parents hadn't drained it behind my back. Not yet. But I was paranoid too. I started locking my bedroom door whenever I left the house. I hid the folder inside an old shoebox under my bed, wedged between some ratty sneakers I hadn't worn in years. Sometimes I'd come home and scan my room like a detective, looking for signs anyone had searched through my stuff. Ethan was the only one I told. He became my anchor, the guy I could vent to when the weight of pretending got too heavy. We'd sit in his beat-up Honda after school, the heater rattling, and I'd spill everything. How my mom's eyes slid past me at dinner. How my dad's voice sounded rehearsed when he said goodnight. Ethan would just listen, nodding, tapping. The steering wheel. Dude, you're handling this better than I would. I'd have blown up by now. Trust me, I said more than once. I want to. But if I do, they'll lock it down tighter. I have to wait. He got it. He didn't. Push. And I can't tell you how much that meant. School became a strange blur. Everyone else was talking about prom plans, graduation trips, and freshman dorm assignments. I smiled in the right places, joined in when I had to. But inside, I was in another world. My entire senior year felt like an act. Teachers congratulated me on my college acceptances. My guidance counselor asked if I needed help with financial aid paperwork. I just nodded and said I was working on it. No way was I dragging my parents into those meetings. They'd only twist it into another excuse. At night, I lay awake planning. If the account stayed untouched, I'd use it to cover my first year, maybe more. I'd get a part-time job to fill the gaps. I didn't need their blessing. I just needed my 18th birthday to arrive without disaster. But of course, disaster always finds cracks to slip through. One night in April, I came home later than usual. Track practice had run long, and Ethan and I stopped for burgers. When I walked into the house, the first thing I noticed was my door. Open. I always locked it, always. My chest tightened as I stepped inside. The shoebox was still under the bed, but I pulled it out anyway, hands trembling. The folder was gone. I froze. For a full minute, I couldn't breathe. My room looked the same, but the one thing that mattered, the one piece of proof I had, was missing. I stormed downstairs, heart hammering. Mom was in the living room folding laundry. Dad sat in his recliner watching some old crime drama. They both looked up when I entered. "Where is it?" My voice was shaking. Mom blinked. "Where's what?" "The folder," I snapped. "The account statements. Where did you put them?" Her mouth tightened. Dad muted the TV. "Those papers don't concern you," he said evenly. "They're mine," I shouted. "My name's on that account. You don't get to hide it from me." Mom stood, setting the laundry basket down. "We found them when we were cleaning. We didn't think you needed to keep obsessing. It's better if we handle it." Handle it. That phrase nearly broke me. I didn't trust myself to keep standing there. If I did, I'd say something I couldn't take back. So I turned, stomped upstairs, and slammed my door. My hands shook as I texted Ethan. They found the folder, took it. What if they take the money too? He called me immediately. "Listen, man, they can't just do that, right? Isn't it in your name?" I explained what the credit union rep had told me. How I had rights, but not full control until 18. So they could touch it? Ethan asked. I sank onto the edge of my bed. Yeah, if they wanted to. They're still listed as custodians. For the first time, real fear sank in. What if they drained it before my birthday? What if all my waiting, all my pretending, was for nothing? That night, I barely slept. By morning, my plan had changed. I couldn't just wait anymore. I needed insurance. So after school, I went back to the credit union. I sat down with a different representative, a woman in her 40s with sharp glasses and a calm voice. I explained the situation carefully, that I was the beneficiary, that my parents were custodians, that I was turning 18 in a few months. She listened, then leaned forward slightly. I can put a note on the account. It won't stop your parents from accessing it, but it will flag any major withdrawals. We'll notify you immediately if they try. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Do it, I said, walking out. Of the branch that day, I felt like I'd finally taken a step forward. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I wasn't just reacting. I was protecting myself. But I knew it wasn't over. If my parents were willing to lie once, they'd lie again. And if they thought I was still in the dark, they'd feel safer. So I went back to pretending, smiling at dinner, talking about homework, acting like I'd let it go. Inside, though, I was counting down the days to my 18th birthday. Because once that day came, the account would be mine, and so would the truth. Part 4. The birthday line. The calendar on my wall became less a way to track homework deadlines and more a countdown clock. Every morning, before heading to school, I'd scratch a small line through the square with a dull pencil. One day closer. One step nearer to freedom. But as my 18th birthday crept up, I couldn't shake the paranoia. My parents had already taken the folder. They'd already lied once. What would stop them from making one last move before the deadline? 2 weeks before my birthday, I came home to find Mom sitting at the dining room table with bills spread everywhere. The room smelled like ink and candle wax. She looked up as I walked in, her expression pinched. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, her tone too light, too deliberate. "How was school?" "Fine." I glanced at the papers, all fanned out like a trap. She shifted in her chair. "You know, Dad and I were talking. College is expensive. Even with savings, it might not be enough. We were thinking it would be best if we manage what's left, so you don't get overwhelmed." There it was. The last push. I clenched my fists. "It's not yours to manage." Her lips thinned. "We're trying to help you." "No," I said quietly. "You're trying to control me." After that, the tension in the house doubled. Dad stopped with the fake small talk. Mom avoided me unless she had to speak. Every meal was eaten in silence, the scrape of cutlery louder than words. Ethan told me to crash at his place until my birthday, but I couldn't. If I left, they might think it gave them free rein. I needed to stay close, keep my eyes open. So I endured. 3 days before my birthday, something happened that confirmed my worst fear. I was in the kitchen grabbing a soda when I heard my parents' voices from the den. The door was slightly open, their words carrying out into the hallway. "If we don't use it now, he'll take it all," Mom whispered sharply. Dad's voice was lower, heavier. "It's supposed to be his. You know that." "And what about us?" Mom snapped. "Do you think he understands what this house cost us? What we sacrificed? He'll blow it in 1 semester. At least this way, it won't be wasted." I froze, soda can sweating in my hand. They were planning to drain it, right before my birthday. That night, I couldn't think straight. I paced my room until my legs ached, my mind racing through every possibility. I needed proof if they tried to take it. I needed to make sure I could stop them, even if it meant stepping into a fight I wasn't ready for. So the next day, I skipped lunch and went straight to the credit union. I sat across from the same woman who'd flagged the account weeks earlier. "Please," I said, my voice shaking. "You told me you'd notify me if they tried anything. Has there been movement?" She checked her screen, then shook her head. "No, nothing yet." Relief and dread crashed together inside me. Not yet, but soon. On the morning of my birthday, I woke before dawn. The house was silent, the air heavy, with that strange stillness you only get before sunrise. I pulled on jeans, grabbed my backpack, and slipped out the door before my parents were awake. At the credit union, the lights were just flickering on. I waited outside, tapping my foot against the pavement, until they opened the doors. When I walked in, I went straight to the desk. "I'm 18 today," I said, sliding over my ID with trembling hands. "I want full control of my account." The woman typed quickly, glanced at the screen, then smiled faintly. "Congratulations. We'll remove the custodianship immediately. The account is now solely in your name." I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for months. For the first time, the money was mine. Untouchable. But I wasn't finished. That evening when I came home, Mom and Dad were waiting at the table. The folder, my folder, sat between them. Mom's face was tight. "We need to talk." I set my backpack down slowly. "About the account?" "Yes," Dad said. "About the account." I sat across from them, steadying my hands on the wood grain. For once, I didn't feel powerless. I felt prepared. Mom cleared her throat. "We've been managing it for years. We think it's best if—" "No." My voice cut through the air. "It's mine now, legally. I went this morning." Her face drained of color. Dad leaned back, frowning deeply. "You went without telling us?" "Yes," I said. "Because you lied to me. Both of you. You told me it was gone when it wasn't. You tried to hide it. And then you talked about taking it right before my birthday." Their silence was deafening. Finally, Mom's voice cracked. "We only wanted to protect you." I shook my head. "You wanted to protect yourselves. Admit it." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't look away. Dad didn't say anything. He just rubbed his face, like the weight of everything had finally landed on him. I stood, sliding the folder back into my bag. "I'm done pretending. This account isn't yours anymore, and neither is my trust." I walked upstairs, every step feeling like a line I'd finally crossed. But here's the thing. Taking control of the money didn't erase the damage. It just lit up how deep the betrayal went. The question now wasn't whether I could pay for college. It was whether I could ever look at my parents the same way again. And I didn't know the answer. Part 5. What trust costs. The days after my birthday felt surreal. I had the account in my name, the balance safe where no one could touch it, and yet the house felt heavier than ever. Meals became almost unbearable. Mom moved through them like a ghost, setting food on the table without speaking, and Dad barely looked up from his plate. When he did, his eyes carried something I couldn't quite read. Guilt, anger, maybe both. I thought taking control of the money would free me. Instead, it just threw a spotlight on everything that had already broken. A week later, Ethan asked me straight out, "So, what now?" "You got the money. You won, right?" I stared at the condensation sliding down my soda can, the cheap diner light reflecting in little streaks. "I didn't win," I said finally. "I just proved I wasn't crazy." He tilted his head. "That's a win, man." "Maybe." I rubbed the back of my neck. "But they're still my parents. I still have to walk into that house every night. And it's not like you can unhear the things they said." Ethan nodded, quiet for once. That's what I liked about him. He didn't always try to fix things with words. The breaking point came one Sunday evening. Mom caught me in the hallway as I was heading upstairs. Her hands were clasped tight, knuckles white, her voice trembling. "Can we just start over?" she asked. "Pretend this whole thing never happened?" I looked at her, at the woman who had smiled every time she tucked my birthday checks into an envelope and promised, "Someday this will help you." At the same woman who later told me it was gone, who planned to take it before I turned 18. "No," I said quietly. "We can't." Her lips pressed together, her eyes glassy. She nodded once, like she already knew that was the only answer I could give. Dad and I never had a big confrontation after that. He carried himself like a man who'd lost something he couldn't name. Sometimes I caught him staring at me like he wanted to explain, but the words never came. And maybe I didn't want them. The truth was simple enough. They lied. They lied for reasons they probably justified to themselves, but a lie that big doesn't wash out just because time passes. Graduation came. While other kids posed for photos, with their families holding balloons and flowers, I felt like I was just going through the motions. My parents clapped, smiled, even hugged me for pictures, but the smiles felt painted on. After the ceremony, Ethan's mom hugged me tighter than my own did. That stung more than I wanted to admit. When it came time to leave for college, I packed quietly. Mom hovered in the doorway but didn't say much. Dad carried one of my boxes to the car, set it down without a word, and walked back inside. Ethan helped me load the rest. As we shut the trunk, he muttered, "Guess they're not gonna miss you." I shrugged. Or maybe they'll miss the control more than me. At school, I paid the first semester tuition with my own account. Standing at that bursar's office window handing over the check, I felt a strange mix of pride and sorrow. Pride that I had done it myself. Sorrow that it had come at such a cost. Because the money didn't just buy me classes. It came with the price tag of trust I could never get back. Sometimes, late at night in the dorm, I wonder what my grandparents would think if they knew. I think they'd be proud I made it to college, but I know they'd be furious at my parents for trying to take what was meant for me. That thought keeps me steady, reminds me I wasn't wrong for fighting. Now, when people talk about family, I smile but keep quiet. Family is supposed to mean safety, honesty, the people who lift you when you fall. For me, it became the opposite. The people I had to guard myself against. I don't hate them, but I don't trust them either. And I've learned that sometimes that's worse. Taking that account didn't just give me tuition, it gave me a truth I couldn't unsee. That the people who raised me could choose control over honesty. That sometimes the hardest part of growing up isn't leaving home, but realizing it was never as safe as you thought it was. And now, every step I take forward is mine alone. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.